Yes, it is true. Venus retrograde can mean that an ex or two, or maybe even three, may come knocking at your door once again, all right? But that literally just scratches the surface in terms of what Venus retrograde has to offer, all right? Especially this particular Venus retrograde, okay? So Venus doesn't go retrograde too often. It goes retrograde about every 18 months. And so every year and a half, we all get the opportunity for a redo in the two areas of life where most of us, if not all of us, want to experience a redo or significant changes, all right? And that is love and money. All right, this particular Venus retrograde is literally gonna be one for the books, and I'm not even exaggerating about that. The astrology is low-key kind of insane, all right? But nevertheless, in this video, we will be covering everything, or should I say I will be covering everything that you need to know about the upcoming Venus retrograde, all right? And stick around because I have a free live event coming up where I will share deeper insights all about Venus retrograde, all right? So stick around, you definitely don't want to miss this. Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. If this is our first time meeting, welcome. My name is Mel. I'm a professional astrologer and sound therapist, and I'm the founder of Divine Feminine Works, where I help people unlock their divinity and discover their magic, all right? And as always, if you are returning, welcome back. So, as you can tell by the title and the intro, this video is all about the upcoming Venus retrograde, which begins on March 1st and ends on April 12th. All right, now we're in a very interesting sort of time, astrologically speaking. Today is February 23rd and Mars has just gone direct, okay? I did a whole video about Mars retrograde. I talked ad nauseum about it. So if you want to check that out, sort of looking at it in hindsight, I'll leave the link in the description box below. However, it's like we're trading one retrograde for the other. All right, so Mars was retrograde since December. It ends today on February 23rd. We get a couple of days reprieve, and then on March 1st, to open up the month, we've got Venus going retrograde. Now, this video isn't to compare the two. I just wanted to mention it so that you get an understanding of what the energy feels like. Now, undoubtedly, you felt the effects of Mars retrograde because it slowed things down completely. Okay. Now, this is due in part because Mars is a masculine energy planet. It's all about action and initiation. And so when it goes retrograde, we feel it viscerally. Okay. So I don't want you to get concerned like, oh my gosh, we just had a Mars retrograde. Now we've got a Venus retrograde. I can't get anything done. Nothing's going to happen. It's not necessarily like that. Now, like I said, Mars retrograde, it's very much slow down, stop. That ability to express yourself, the ability to do things was hindered, right? Was put into hibernation, if you will. Venus, on the other hand, is a feminine energy planet. So it's not about doing, it's about being, okay? So the way that this Venus retrograde may play out, like in a practical sort of way, is that the ability to receive, the ability to embody, right, may be slow. So, like I said before, love and money are the two areas of life, generally speaking, that Venus covers, right? And these are the areas where we get a redo. Now, the best way to make changes is to embody the changes that you already want to experience. And so if you're trying to embody, let's say, luxury, or let's say romantic love, you may find that those efforts are a bit stifled, okay? And keep this in mind when it comes to retrogrades. Retrogrades aren't for no reason. The reason why things are stifled or slowed down or stagnant even with any retrograde is because it gives you the opportunity to fine-tune the energy signature of that planet. So when we're talking about Venus retrograde, this is embodying wealth. This is embodying abundance. This is embodying love. This is embodying financial success. Whatever it is that you're looking to achieve, with this Venus retrograde, you can do so by fine-tuning yourself to attune to the frequency of those things, okay? And so when it comes to retrograde, like I said, exes may be coming back around. That's surface level. But if you take it a level deeper, relationship patterns may reemerge. You know how you've listened, especially if you're a woman, and this is no shade to women, clearly I am one, but you know how we'll complain about men all the time? Oh, I dated this guy, he was just like the last guy. All guys read from the same book. Yeah, sometimes. But more likely, it is a pattern, perhaps a karmic pattern in your life that just keeps playing out. It's like when you're in school. If you don't pass your tests, if you fail the year, you gotta go and redo it, right? Or go to summer school. Either way, when we experience a retrograde, that's kind of what we're doing. If we haven't learned our lesson the first time, we get a chance to not only relearn it, but fine tune it. And that's exactly what Venus has to offer. So the one thing I will say out the gate when it comes to this upcoming Venus retrograde is you need to hone in on what financial success, wealth, abundance, love, affection, relationships, partnership, commitment. This is your time to get really clear on what you want that to look like in your life and how you want to experience that in your life, all right? Because what Venus retrograde is going to do is it's going to take all these things and bring them back around to face you, slap you in the face maybe, so that you can course correct and so you can figure out, all right, I want to be, let's say you want to be debt free, okay? Maybe you have a lack mentality. Maybe you're afraid of spending money. Maybe you have hangups when it comes to money. Venus retrograde may bring up collection calls, creditors, people that you owe money to. Venus retrograde may bring that back around so that you can finally face that fear, number one. And number two, break that karmic pattern or cycle, okay? So much can be achieved when we use the energy of retrograde, particularly this Venus retrograde. All right, so now let's get into the details of the astrology, because like I said, the astrology for this retrograde is definitely something else. All right, so let's talk astrology. So in terms of the specifics, Venus will begin her retrograde period in the sign of Aries, and then will retrograde back into Pisces. All right, and I find this so fascinating because Aries is the beginning and Pisces is the end. So there's something inherent in the energy of this Venus retrograde that's like the alpha and the omega, right? Beginning to end. To me, it feels like this very holistic, very comprehensive retrograde. It's like a roundup of all, and I mean this, all of your relationship issues and your money issues. Now, apart from just money and relationships, Venus has everything to do with value, among other things, and fairness. So maybe money and being booed up aren't the subject matters for you for this retrograde, all right? And it's definitely going to depend on where Aries and Pisces are in your natal chart. But maybe it's self-esteem that's going to be coming up for review for you. Maybe it's self-worth. Maybe it's your confidence even in yourself when it comes to starting new things. And that's very emblematic of Venus in Aries, okay? Aries is the initiator, the starter, the shit starter, I should say, right? Because Aries can be a little combative. It can be a little, competitive. But in terms of Venus in Aries, Venus in Aries wants you to focus on yourself. Independence, autonomy, those are sort of the undertones of the first part of this Venus retrograde when Venus is retrograding in Aries, okay? So it's not so much about relationships in the sense that you're always thinking of the other person, right? Venus in Aries retrograde is really going to get you to look at your own shit. And how do relationships fit into your life, okay? Aries always calls us to be a little selfish. And sometimes that can be difficult in relationships, right? Because we're thinking about the other person. There's someone else to think about, someone else to consider. Sometimes, depending on your particular makeup, character-wise, you may be someone who wants to appease other people to keep the peace or to maintain a relationship. Meanwhile, you've lost your entire sense of self. If that's the case, Venus in Aries is really going to bring that front and center so that you can finally address that, okay? Self-autonomy, being able to stand on your own 2 feet, whether you are single or coupled, is definitely going to be a theme of this Venus retrograde, okay? Now, on the money side of things, Aries starts things, like I said before, it's the initiator. Now, when it comes to Venus in Aries, perhaps there are money-making endeavors, financial projects, or anything having to do with finances that maybe you haven't started, maybe you haven't felt worthy of starting, right? Venus retrograde in Aries is like, listen, whatever fears or insecurities are preventing you from being courageous and being fearless in starting new financial things, those are going to come up to the surface so that you can address them, so that you can finally start some new things and make some new money, open some new income streams, whatever it is. Either way, when it comes to Venus retrograde in Aries, it's this energy of taking care of self, right? Self-preservation, and what are my needs and desires in relationship. Okay, so the best advice while Venus is retrograde in Aries, think of yourself, think of your desires, and how can or does a relationship fit into that? Perhaps there are desires you had that you put on the back burner for whatever reason. Venus retrograde in Aries may reignite those, right? Aries is a fire sign, so there is an element of passion to it. When it comes to a relationship, when it comes to anything that you desire, Venus can bring that up. And this is particularly why exes may come back around, okay? You have to be kind of careful with this energy though, because Aries is kind of lustful. It's very physical, so very sex oriented, right? So people may be coming around for less than, not commitment, let's say that. They're looking for a good time, maybe not a long time, all right? But at the same time, there's this passion that may be reignited in people. Like, damn, I really want that old thing back. Or, man, he and I used to have the best sex. Like, I wonder what he's doing right now. I wonder where he is, right? Those are all valid, and those are all things that may come up. Now, whether you exercise those desires, right, is a different story. But that's sort of the flavor of Venus retrograde in Aries, okay? And then Venus is going to move back into Pisces, the sign of its exaltation. Now, if you're new to astrology, when a planet is exalted, it is in the sign where it shines the most, where the energy is most favorable. And for Venus, that is the sign of Pisces. And this is love. Oh, love on the highest level. It's rose-colored glasses. It's sweet nothings. It's romance. It's romance novel kind of energy, okay? Whether you like it or not. However, even if you're not someone who's lovey-dovey, all about PDA and all of those typical romantic things, I think that the overarching theme of Venus retrograde in Pisces is your relationship with love itself. How do you feel about it? Do you shun at the fact of being loved, or giving love? Does love make you feel uncomfortable? Does love trigger you, right? Your hangups, your insecurities, everything about love is going to come back up to the surface. Now, again, Venus covers love and money, but I feel like Venus retrograde in Aries may have more of a financial flavor to it, perhaps, but I feel like Venus retrograde in Pisces, it's really about love, self-love, spiritual love, love of humanity, romantic love, things that sometimes many of us feel uncomfortable about for whatever reason. Venus retrograde is going to bring it front and center so you can recalibrate. Okay? Now, the thing here is that as much as Venus retrograde in Aries could bring back an ex who just wants to be an F buddy, right? Venus retrograde in Pisces could stir up romantic feelings in people. Perhaps people that you've dated in the past, people that you've been with, okay? So, again, that's something to keep in mind. But the thing about Venus, even though it is about love, right? It's also about fairness. Venus is the ruler of Libra, okay? And so it's the scales, it's balance. So while romantic love is great, if you're giving it, are you receiving it, right? There is an undertone of receptivity with Venus retrograde in Pisces that maybe you'll need to examine, okay, while Venus is retrograde in Pisces. So as you can tell by the astrology, at least when it comes to actual Venus retrograde, there's a lot that can be redone, recalibrated on so many levels. Remember, this retrograde between Aries and Pisces, it's like alpha and omega. It is going to sweep up everything and bring it back up. If you're familiar with the tarot, this is giving the Fool card next to the World card. And so when we're done with this Venus retrograde cycle, the changes that can come about can be legendary. And I'm not saying that for conjecture. I'm saying that because it's true. And the other astrology that's going on during this time is, like I said, kind of insane. So we've got Venus retrograde. During Venus retrograde, Mercury is going to go retrograde. That's a whole other beast. Venus is also going to make aspects to Pluto, Neptune, the North Node, and Saturn. Now, I will be going through all of this in more detail in my live webinar, right? And I'll give you the details at the end of this video. But there is something about this Venus retrograde that is destined and fated. Not only that, there's going to be this touch of magic that you probably can't even escape, okay? Like I said, this Venus retrograde is definitely going to be one for the books. All right, so now that we talked about the astrology, let's get a little more practical and talk about what this is actually going to feel like during this retrograde period. All right, so let's talk about some experiences, what you can expect, who will be affected the most, and some do's and don'ts during this Venus retrograde cycle. All right, so in terms of what you can expect, now, like I said, exes may come back around, but more than likely it may just be relationship patterns. Now, this could show up in a new person. Maybe a new person comes into your life. Maybe you meet somebody, or even if you're in a relationship or even like a business partnership per se, maybe a new situation may arise that brings up an old pattern, okay? Now, since Aries has a lot to do with initiation, starting, and being fearless, fears surrounding love, money, equality, fairness, self-worth, self-esteem, right? Those can probably come up too in order for you to break those karmic cycles. Now with Venus in Pisces, right? Venus in Pisces has a lot to do with our imagination, with our dreams. And so issues related to feeling hopeless, feeling like nothing is ever going to change, a lack of vision maybe, may come up kind of to get you to broaden your horizons and break down those barriers when it comes to issues related to love or money, okay? Now, to understand exactly how this is going to affect you, you'll need to look at Aries and Pisces in your natal chart. This will let you know the two areas of life where this retrograde is happening and what specific issues may come up for you. Now, as a tidbit of information, during my free live webinar, I will be going through all of the signs so everyone knows exactly how this retrograde will affect them. All right, and I'll give details about that at the end of the video. So, in terms of who will be affected the most? Now, we're all always affected by retrogrades, no matter which ones, right? But certain signs will experience this the most because of their astrological placements and configurations. So first, If you are Venusian, meaning if you are a Taurus rising, a Libra rising, or if you've got Venus in Taurus, Venus in Libra, you guys are going to feel this because Venus is prominent for you. In the case of Taurus and Libra rising, Venus is your chart ruler. So anything that Venus is doing or going through is always going to affect you the most. If you've got Venus in her home signs, aka Taurus and Libra, you guys will feel this intently as well because the subject matter of this retrograde is Venus. Now, if you are someone who has either Venus or any of the personal planets in late degrees of Aries or early degrees of Pisces, you are also going to feel this the most, okay? Because the retrograde is going to be hitting those personal planets, okay? Also, if you are someone who has any personal planets or even Venus, well, Venus is a personal planet, but if you've got any personal planets in the early degrees of Virgo, you'll likely feel this as well, okay? Whether it's Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, you guys, particularly when Venus is retrograde in Pisces, if you've got personal planets in the early degrees of those signs, you may feel it the most. When Venus is retrograde in Aries, if you've got any personal planets in late degrees of Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you guys may feel this intently as well, all right? And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. You'll understand, especially if you attend the webinar, all right? So now let's talk about some do's and don'ts during retrogrades. Now, generally speaking, retrogrades are not necessarily the time to start anything new. Now, here's the caveat. Depending on your own configuration in your natal chart, sometimes starting something during retrograde could be beneficial to you, but you'd really have to look at your natal chart to know. Now, when it comes to Venus, Venus is not just about relationships, she's about looks and attraction. Venus retrograde is not the time to get a new haircut. It's not the time to dye your hair. It's not the time to get any cosmetic surgery. If you've ever seen the show Botched, not to say that that would happen, but those things are very likely to happen when Venus is retrograde, okay? Now, when it comes to starting new things, particularly like financial things, relationships, you may want to hold off on that while Venus is retrograde. So while those are the don'ts, let's talk about the do's. Being able to recalibrate and reflect are the major do's for Venus retrograde. So whatever comes up, you got to reflect on it. Don't just stuff it under the rug. Don't just ignore it or shove it in the back of a closet. Whatever comes up, address it because it's getting you to fine tune your frequency to the highest level of money, love, abundance, all of those things, right? So reflect, take the time to reflect. For some, Venus retrograde can feel kind of frustrating because like I said before, Venus is receptive because it is a feminine energy planet. So when it comes to receiving things, maybe even money, when it comes to receiving love, these things may slow down a bit, all right? Now, Venus retrograde lasts literally for 40 days and 40 nights. And I know you've heard that phrase before. It's quite famous, right? Particularly in the Bible. It really harkens back to the Venus retrograde cycles, 40 days and 40 nights. So for 40 days and 40 nights, you can survive. It'll be okay. Things will start moving once Venus goes direct, okay? But reflect, recalibrate, rest even. Like if someone, the image that spirit keeps giving me is someone who's like a serial dater. You're on all the apps, you're going out on dates and stuff, and guess what? Venus retrograde may be dry as fuck, right? No dates, no sex, no nothing. When we withhold certain things from ourselves, it fortifies us, right? When guys talk about like no fap November, or when there's semen retention, or people are talking about celibacy, it is to strengthen your own energy. So regardless of where Venus retrograde is happening for you, practicing some of that, I mean, if you're coupled and you have a healthy sex life, that's one thing, right? But if you're kind of out there scattering your energy all over the place, no judgment, of course, this may be a time to rein that in, right? And fortify your own energy. So rest, recalibrate, rein in that energy, and reflect. There's going to be a lot to see and a lot to experience with this Venus retrograde. All right. So with that being said, you now know what to do and what not to do. So this video is literally just scratching the surface with respect to Venus retrograde. Now, if you want to go deeper and really understand what Venus retrograde has in store for you specifically and how you can use this energy to propel you forward into the life that you ultimately want, then you will want to join my free live webinar called Venus Retrograde Rundown. All right. I'll be really going in depth in terms of what to expect, how the energy is going to play out, and other important information that you need in order to harness the energy of this Venus retrograde. All right. So this live webinar is going down on Thursday, February 27th at 8:30 p.m. It's going down live in my online community, Cosmic Collective. It's absolutely free. Plus, you get access to Cosmic Collective, where you can mix and mingle with other astrology enthusiasts. Like, you really can't go wrong with this webinar. All right. So link is in the description box below. Spots are limited, so definitely sign up sooner rather than later. And if you want to know more, and I'm talking about know even more, plus get in on some healing to really eliminate those blockages, then I've got something special for 10 select goddesses for this Venus retrograde. All right. I'm going to go through all the details in Thursday's webinar, but let me give you the title. It is called Pleasure and Prosperity. And honey, we are going to be getting down and dirty into everything that you need to know to experience more pleasure and prosperity in your life. All right. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We will talk all about that in the live webinar. All right. So again, if you want to sign up, link is in the description box below. And I'm so excited to not only be hosting this webinar, but to see you in there and help you use this energy to transform. All right, my loves. So that concludes this video on the upcoming Venus retrograde. I sincerely hope that you were able to get at least one important piece of information that you can use going into this retrograde and beyond. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully I will see you in the live webinar, but if this is where you drop off, no worries. I'll definitely see you in my next video. All right, my loves, take care.